So there's some reading I have to do for English, and in order to force myself to actually do it, I'm going to turn it into a series. Um, so the first book I'm going to read is Stone Cold by Robert Swindells. Um, you don't have to watch these. I just want to make them so that I can convince myself to do it. I suppose this is the start. You can call me Link. It's not my name, but it's what I say when anybody asks, which isn't often. I'm invisible, see? One of the invisible people. Right now I'm sitting in a doorway watching the passers-by. They avoid looking at me. They're afraid I want something they've got, and they're right. Also, they don't want to think about me. They don't like reminding I exist. Me, and those like me, we're living proof that everything's not all right, and we make this place untidy. Hang about, and I'll tell you the story of my fascinating life. Daily Orders Routine 1. Shelter. Yes, I like it. It's got a ring to it, as I'm sure you'll all agree. Shelter, as in shelter from the stormy blast. It's what they're all seeking, the street people, what they crave. If they can only find shelter, everything will be fine. Well, get fell in, my lucky lads. I'm ready for you. That's what it says. I don't know what that means. My fascinating life. Yes. Born March 20th, 1977 in Bradford, Yorkshire, to Mr. and Mrs. X. We were a family, you know. As happy as most, till Dad ran off with a receptionist in 1991, when I was 14, and at the local comp. This mucked up my schoolwork for quite a while, but that's not why I ended up like this. No, Vincent's to blame for that. Good old Vince, Mum's boyfriend. You should see him. I mean, Mum's no Kylie Minogue, but Vincent, he's about 50 for a start, and he's one of those old dudes that wear cool gear and tries to act young. And it doesn't work because they've got grey hair and fat bellies, and they just make themselves pathetic. And as if that's not enough, Vince likes his ale. I suppose Dad must have been a bit of a bastard in his way, but at least he wasn't a boozer. You should see the state Vincent's in. When he and Mum come home from the club, he's got this very loud laugh, laughing at nothing, if you know what I mean. He stands there with his arm round Mum, slurring his words as he tells me to call him Dad. Dad. I wouldn't call that fat pillock Dad if he was the last guy on earth. And the one thing that really bugs me is the way he leers at Mum and comes out with this very suggestive stuff about going to bed and rounding off a decent night. In all the years Dad was with us, I never once knew him to mention sex in my hearing, or even hint at it. This slob leers and winks and nudges, with one eye on me to see how I'm taking it. And Mum just laughs and shoves him and says, "Ooh, you are a one." It makes me puke. He's changed her. That's one of the things I hate him for. She used to be one of those quiet people who are satisfied with the daily routine of their lives. She hardly ever went out at night. She didn't seem to want to. She was wrapped up in her family. I guess she was always there when you need... I guess. Full stop. She was always there when you needed her. And I think she loved us. Me and Carol, I mean. Oh, I know how it sounds, me going on like this about Mum, as though she wasn't entitled to a life of her own. Of course she's entitled, but what I'm saying is, why Vince? Carol's my sister, by the way. She's 4 years older than me, and she always spoiled me. And when good old Vince moved in, and Mum started changing, it was Carol who made life bearable for me. It was bad, but I could stand it with her there to support me. Then one night, when Mum was working late, something happened between Carol and Vince. I didn't understand it then. She never told me anything, but I've got a fair idea now what it must have been. Anyway, she said something to Mum, and they had this flaming row. It ended with Carol walking out of the house. She moved in with her boyfriend, and I was on my own. I stuck out till I finished school, but that was I'd gone 5 GCSEs. I'd got 5 GSCEs, sorry, which was a miracle when you remember what was going on at home. But I couldn't get a job. There's no government money for school leavers. You're supposed to be on a training scheme, but there aren't enough places, and I didn't get one. I'm sure Mum would have supported me till I found something, but it wasn't long before Vince started on at me about living on his money. I wasn't living on his money. I'd have myself I have topped myself up first. I'm bad. I think I'm like dyslexic or something. I can't read this shit. I mean, this dookie. It was Mum's money, but he went on, getting nastier and nastier. And one night, I, when I'd been with my mates, he locked me out of the house. It wasn't even his house, but he locked the door and wouldn't let Mum open it. I went round to Carol's and she let me spend the night. And when I got home the next morning, Vince started slapping me around the head for going off and worrying Mum. If you happen to know anybody who's looking for a 100% out and out bastard, I can let him have Vince's address. Anyway, that's how he was with me, and I guess Mom's scared of him now because she didn't stick up for me. So, I left. You'd have left too in my place. Anybody would. It's called making yourself homeless. And so here I am, sitting in this doorway, which is now my bedroom, hoping some kind punter will give me a small bit of change so I can eat. Good, eh? Daily routine orders 2. I'm getting used to my new name, breaking it in like a pair of new breaking it in like a pair of new boots. Good morning, Shelter, I say to the bathroom mirror, smiling. Good morning, Shelter. You're a handsome devil, but you're idle. Lad, you need a shave. I've been writing it too, on the backs of old envelopes. Shelter, Shelter, Shelter. It's starting to look like an authentic signature already. I realize that all this has precious little to do with recruiting. These stupid British bits of slang I don't understand. Precious little to do with recruiting, and perhaps you think I'm stalling, putting it off. Not so. I'm merely indulging myself. After all, there's plenty of time. The street people aren't going to go away. And anticipation is the best part of a treat, as my old granny never used to say. So it's a case of wait for it, you horrible little man. I didn't come to London straight away. I may be homeless and unemployed, but I'm not stupid. I read about London. I knew the streets down here weren't paved with gold. I knew there were hundreds of people, thousands in fact, sleeping rough and begging for coppers. But that's just the point, see? In Bradford, I stuck out like a sore thumb, because there weren't many of us. The police down here have got used to seeing kids kipping in doorways, and mostly they leave you alone. In Bradford, I was getting moved on every hour or so. I was getting no sleep at all, and practically no money. People up there haven't got used to beggars yet. They're embarrassed. They'll make large detours to avoid passing close to you, and if somebody does come within earshot and you ask for change, they look startled and hurry on by. Also, I kept seeing people I knew, neighbors, guys I'd been at school with. I even saw one of my teachers once. And if you've ever been caught begging by someone you knew before, you can't possibly know how low it makes you feel. I wasn't out every night back then. That was the good thing about it. Once or twice a week I'd show up at my sister's for a bath, a meal, and a decent night's sleep. Trouble was, I was getting scruffier and scruffier, which happens if you sleep in your clothes. Chris, Carol's feller, got resentful of my visits. He didn't actually say anything to me, but I could see it in his eyes and hear it in his tone of voice. I knew Carol must be catching hell from him every time I'd been there. So, what with one thing and another, I decided to move on. Sounds good, right? Time to move on. Reminds you of all those old songs about the restless character who hates to stay too long in one place. He meets a girl who falls in love with him, but after a while he hears the old highway calling, so he slings his bedroll over his shoulder and moves on, leaving the girl to grieve. Dead romantic, eh? Forget it. Sad is what it is. Sad and scary. You're leaving a place you know and heading into the unknown with nothing to protect you. No money, no prospect of work, no address where folks will make you feel welcome. You're gonna find yourself living among hard, violent people, some of whom are deranged. You're gonna be at risk. Every minute, day and night. Especially night. There are guys so desperate or crazy, they'll knife you or batter your head in for your sleeping bag and the coppers you've got in your pocket. There are people who'll try to get in your sleeping bag with you because you're a nice looking lad with soft skin and no stubble. And there's nowhere you can run to because nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn. You're just another dosser, and one dosser more or less makes no difference. How many pages are there in this thing? Okay, I'll get to the fifth little page. One of these little segments. Daily routine orders 3. I've been out tonight. I looked the tube down to Charing Cross and walked about a bit. Tour of inspection, you might say. And I found them, as I'd known I would. Hundreds of the scruffy blighters lying around, making the place look manky. I marched along the Strand, and there they were, dossing in all the doorways. Even Lloyd's Bank and the law courts. One cheeky little bugger couldn't have been more than 17. Actually asked me for money. Have you got any change, he says. I looked him up and down. I said, change? I'd change you, my lad. If I had you in khaki for 6 weeks. It didn't go in though. He just smiled and said, have a nice night. Crack her up his ass. That's what he wants. That'd wake him up. That or 6 weeks at Strensel. National Service. That was the thing, it brought 'em all in. The Teds, the Rockers, the Mammy's boys. And it changed 'em. By golly, it did. Hold on, I'm gonna put on a small, I'm gonna make it colder in here. There were no teddy boys on that passing out parade, I can tell you, and no rockers either. Soldiers, that's what it made of 'em. There were no exceptions. And that was my mission in life, to turn dirty, scruffy, and pimply youths into soldiers, into men. And I did it too, year after year. Yes. And what thanks do I get? I'll tell you. They chuck me out. 29 years service, and they turn round and chuck me out. Medical grounds, it says on the chit? Discarded on medical grounds. And there's nothing wrong with me. Nothing. I'm 47 and fit as a butcher's dog. Medical grounds is just an excuse, of course. I know why they really chucked me out. They chucked me out because their mission in life is exactly the opposite of mine. They think I don't know that, but I do. They're all part of the plot, see? There's a plot. It's been hatching a long time now, to undermine the country by clogging it up with dossers and junkies and drunks. Some of the top politicians are in it, and civil servants and social workers, and even the church. They want to flood the country with winnows and crims and down and outs, and drag it down till it's no better than some of the filthy holes I've served in all these years. They're powerful, and they'll stop at nothing. What's the career of one sergeant major to them? Nothing, that's what. Nothing. They're not going to stop me, though. Oh, no. They abolished national service, and they've put me where I can where I can't turn garbage into men anymore. But I can clean up the garbage, can't I? They can't stop me doing that. And I will. By golly, I will. Now, where did we get to? Oh, yes. I remember. Time to move on. I'd applied for loads of jobs in the months since I'd left school, Office work, supermarkets, catering, filling stations, you name it. Most employers wanted experience, and some ads actually said unemployed persons need not apply, which is criminal in my opinion. I'd started applying in August, and I had a couple more interviews, but as I said before, sleeping in your clothes makes you look scruffy, and by Christmas I looked like a tramp. I knew nobody was going to take me on looking like that, and I started getting really depressed. Christmas didn't help. I spent it at Carol's, and which was kind of her and Chris, but it was still the worst Christmas I'd ever had. For a start, there was my present. Carol and Mum had put their money together and got me this sleeping bag, a really posh a really posh job, quilted, waterproof, the lot. It must have cost a bomb, and I knew they only meant to be kind, but it said something to me. It said they thought of me as a dosser, someone who might always be a dosser, so he might as well be as comfy as possible. It hurt like hell, but I didn't let them see, and I've got to admit, it's come in handy ever since. Anyway, there was that, and then there was Boxing Day. Boxing Day, Mum came around, and she brought Vince with her. I can only think that Carol had never told Chris the full story about him, or surely Chris wouldn't have had him in the house. Anyway, they came for dinner and stayed till 1 o'clock the next morning, and of course everybody got drunk. Everybody except me. And once he got a skinful, Vince started making cracks about me. The ghost of Christmas past, he called me. Don't ask me why. I was a disgrace, he said, stuffing myself with my sister's grub, sitting there with my long hair and tatty clothes, making Mum feel guilty when she'd done nothing to feel guilty about. I was a scrounger, a sponger, and a layabout, and I ought to be looking for work instead of sitting with a face as long as a fill, spoiling everybody's Christmas. It didn't feel like peace on earth, I can tell you that. There wasn't a lot of goodwill towards men floating about, and the worst thing was, nobody stuck up for me, not even my sister. So it was then I knew I'd worn out my welcome, even here. So, on December 28th, I borrowed the price of a one-way ticket to London. Carol lent me the money. She even came to see me off at the station, and hugged me before I climbed on board with my backpack and my bedroll. The next hug I got was from a stinky old cinderhead in Lincoln's Inn Fields when I gave him 20 pence so he'd leave me alone. Daily routine orders 4. It is 1900 hours, and this has been a most satisfactory day. Most satisfactory. The secret of victory in any campaign is planning and preparation. My planning has been meticulous, and my preparations are now complete. I have acquired a cat. This was my finishing touch. I can't abide by the ass-licking, hair-scattering beasts myself, but you have to admit, there's something reassuring about a home with a cat in it. A cat speaks of warmth, comfort, placid domesticity. God, these stupid words. Just say domesticalness. Whatever. A man who keeps a cat can't possibly mean any harm. Can he? Tell that to every James Bond villain. I've christened it Sappho. A brilliant touch, this, suggesting, as it does, a degree of scholarship in the creature's owner. I don't even know whether the bloody thing's male or female, and I don't care. The point is that a fellow with a cat called Sappho is going to project a certain sort of image, kindly and a bit academic. He might be expected to have a vague conscience about sleeping snug and warm while others live rough. He'll be a bumbler, but he might be a stirred now and then to actually do something about this, to offer grub and a bed for the night to some poor unfortunate soul, no strings attached. So it's Shelter and Sappho. Could be a series on the telly, couldn't it? Shelter and Sappho, otherwise known as The Invincibles. All is ready. Recruiting can now commence. Sappho? You're gonna name it Sappho? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but not what I would have done. I would have named it like George or something. Anyway. So London it was, and London it is. I made loads of mistakes. Most people do. First time in London. Trouble is, once you've made them, it's practically impossible to put things right. You're on the old downward spiral, and that's that. I know you've no idea what I'm on about, so listen. I arrived in midwinter. Not a good idea. Okay, so things were bad at home. Really bad. And I had to get out. But if I'd known what I know now, I'd have hung in there a bit longer, toughed it out with Carol and Chris till March or even April, spend one January night in a shop doorway. And you'll know why. I had 150 quid on me when I got off the train at King's Cross. It was what was left of my savings, plus a 20 Carol slipped me when Chris wasn't looking. 150. Doesn't sound bad, does it? Sounded okay to me. My plan was I'd get a room somewhere, nothing posh, a bed sit, and then I'd look for work again. Nothing posh. I'd take anything for a start, just till I established myself and could look around properly. I was dead green, see? A babe in arms. It isn't like that, but I didn't know. I strode out of the station with my backpack and bedroll. It felt like a new beginning. This was London, wasn't it? The centre where it all happens. It's big, it's fast, and it's full of opportunities. Nobody knows you, where you're from, and what's gone before. That's none of your business. All that stuff with Vince, it never happened. It's a clean sheet. You can't invent your own past and call yourself anything you choose. I made a brilliant start, or so it seemed at the time. I turned right out of the station and started walking. I'd no idea where I was going. I was looking for somewhere to live. The street I was walking up was called Pancras Road. I hadn't gone far when I came to this row of shops under a block of flats. Once there was a newsagent, and there were some postcards stuck out in the glass door. I went for a closer look. They were ads, as I thought they'd be. Articles for sale. The babysitter wanted. House repairs done cheap. One said, B&B, suit working man, rent negotiable. The word negotiable was spelled Negoshable, and the whole thing looked like a 6-year-old had written it. But I didn't care. There was an address, Wharfdale Road. I went in the shop and asked directions, and it was back the way I'd come. It was a sleazoid place, and the rent wasn't all that negotiable either. 50 a week, the guy said. He'd a face like a rat. Fortnight in advance, he said. And I'm doing you a favor. Most places want a month. I'm looking for work, I told him. I haven't much money. Can we negotiate? I told you I was green. Negotiate? His voice was sort of a screech. Sorry.
Negotiate? You can negotiate yourself right out of my house, lad, if that's your attitude. It's 50 a week. Take it or leave it.
I took it, and that was my second mistake. Oh, I was thankful at the time. Don't think I wasn't. I'd a place to lay my head and keep out of the weather, and I hadn't been in London an hour. If I'd known, though, there were other places I could have tried. Places like YMCA, where there's help and advice and food, as well as a bed if you're lucky enough to get in. But like I said, I didn't know. I looked for work, I really did. First thing next morning, I went to the job center. The woman there said I should go to the careers office because I wasn't 18. She said I should go to the DSS as well. I went to the careers office and filled in a form. They asked where I'd come from, and I said the north. I didn't want to be too precise in case good old Vince took it to his head to come looking for me. I gave them my new address, but it was just like at home. There was no work, no training places. I went to the DSS and filled in another form. I asked for advice, and a guy interviewed me. I told him I had £50 after paying 2 weeks' rent in advance, and that I was looking for work. He asked me a lot of stuff about why I'd left home. I explained about Vince and Chris and all that, and he said they'd have to decide whether I was entitled to anything. I might be several weeks, he said. That was when I started to feel nervous. I had a room for 2 weeks maximum. I didn't know much, but I'd a feeling Ratface wasn't the sort who'd wait for his money. If I wasn't earning within a fortnight, I'd be out on my ear. And that's where I'll leave it for today, folks. If you want me to read more of this for some strange, bizarre reason, tell me, I guess. Daily Routine Orders 5, tomorrow.